Good morning, Daylighters. I'm going to tell some stories about Mom today. I recently, and it's going to be weird because that's kind of it. I've wedged in one Bible verse to make it sermon-y, but I'm just going to talk about Mom. I recently acquired Jesus.adjacent on Instagram and Instagram Threads, and I don't know what I'm going to do with it. It just seems like a good idea to have that. But I'm going to start posting Jesus-adjacent things, maybe stuff that's not blatantly in your face Jesus-y, but stuff that's related to Jesus. And that's how I kind of feel about this sermon today, is it feels Jesus-adjacent. Because as you'll hear me say multiple times, hopefully if I remember, there ain't no love like a mama's kind of love. And I know today is sad for some people. I'm determined not to cry. Doggone it, I'm going to cry right now just talking about not crying. I know it's a hard day for some. I know some never knew their moms, or some are isolated from their moms, or they've lost their moms, or moms have lost kids, or moms have tried to have children and can't. And there's many ways why Mother's Day is tough, and we want to acknowledge that every year. One of the symptoms of Parkinson's is weepiness. And so if I cry today, it's not because I'm a little boy wanting his mommy. It's because I have a disease, I promise. It's not because I'm some sap. I've had the privilege of seeing some great moms in action, including my wife, who is, sorry, Kate, she is Mother of the Year, faux show. My mom, her mom, all the moms of the church and the churches that I've been involved with over the years. But this is my mom, Susan Carol Hussman, originally Susan Carol Stevenson, born 1956, died 2013. So the plan is to talk about Mom and kind of the love, because as we talk about at Daylight often is, Christ is God and God is love. And so anything love adjacent feels Jesus adjacent to me. So we're going to talk about Mom. This is the house that I grew up in, the double-wide trailer at the front of Country Oaks Mobile Home Park. The blue one there was the second mobile home we had there. This is a picture from Google Earth, and this tripped me out. Some of you have heard this story, but this picture, my brother sent me this picture in probably 2015, 2016. It was a few years after Mama died, and the wild thing is, that's my mom in that picture. We're pretty sure she drove a white Buick. I think it was a Buick Regal with paint problems on the back of the trunk, and that woman was shaped like her and has the same hair. And so what it looks like is this moment was captured in time before my mom died. She had stopped by for old times, for nostalgia, to see the house. And we used to have a miniature golf course that was in this gravel parking lot here, and we used to have batting cages across the street. These were entrepreneurial endeavors by my dad and my mom. And so it was like seeing a ghost. It seems like the truck caught her at just the right time. I'm going to be transparent with you today. I remember the very first time I ever saw my mom blitzed out of her mind. It was in that trailer right there. Came home from school one day, early afternoon, and she and my cousin Janice had a half-finished bottle of Jack Daniels sitting on the table. So you can't see it in that picture. You can see a circular window there on the left-hand side of that trailer. That's the kitchen, and right in there, at a little square table, they were sitting there drinking. And I was probably 13, 14 years old, and Mom drank occasionally. She would drink at New Year's parties and occasionally throughout the year, but never heavy. And by the time I got in there, they were laughing and cackling and stumbling. And at one point, one of them fell out of their chair onto the ground, uproarious laughter. And I just didn't know what to do with this information. I sat at the table. I said, "Are you guys okay?" And they were just having a hoot of a time. Turns out it was all a prank. It was iced tea in the bottle. And it had gone on for like 20 minutes of me sitting there wide-eyed and wide-mouthed. But Mom was a lot of fun. And I got her back eventually. I never know what I can get away with it as a pastor and as a preacher. So we're going to stretch the boundaries a little bit with this story. But I used to work at a place called Cummings Veterinary Clinic where my mom was the office manager, and I was the dog shearer. I was not a dog groomer. I just took the hair off of dogs. I didn't make them pretty. I just shaved them down bald. And I made good money as a teenager. And one day, I was back in the kennel, and I had sheared 2 black sheepdogs. So I had this pile of black curly hair this tall and this wide. And I thought, you know what? I could sculpt a dog out of that. So I took this big pile of sheepdog hair back to one of the kennels, got inside and got on the ground, got on my knees, and I formed a dog out of the dog hair. And I mean, it was a dog this big, head, tail, legs. I mean, it looked like a big fat dog laying there in the kennel. I put a leash around its neck, a collar around its neck, and a leash attached to the... And this is where the story gets really bad. The white area is a barn because he had a large animal practice, and I went in there and I found one of these. It's so bad. And I stuck it in that dog that I had formed to where it looked like it had come in through the neck and out through the front. Oh, it gets worse. It's bad. It's real bad. I went and got a bottle of iodine out of one of the cabinets. Red iodine, and I squirted red iodine all over that farming implement, the scythe, and down to the drain. You can imagine what this scene looked like. And then I screamed loudly, "Mom, something's wrong with this dog. Get back here." She came back, and as you can guess, she screamed. And she said, "What dog is this?" I said, "I don't know. What's wrong with it?" She got on her knees and felt, I don't know if she's trying to get a pulse or figure out what was going on, but her hand passed right through this big pile of fluff. And there was this moment on her face that she had separated from reality at this point. Like what is going on here? And then she said what she said to me often: "My mom wished you on me." She was a fun mom. This is one of my favorite pictures of her. You can see Siler was really cute at one point. My dad died when I was 9 years old. And my mom invested everything in me and my brother. She said often, "You can do anything you set your mind to." And nowadays I consider that kind of a lie that parents tell their kids. But I believed it. And she made me see the undeniable, that I was handsome and funny and smart. And these are traits that I carry to this day. She taught me the value of hard work. She had the businesses, and she also opened a consignment shop for children for toys and such. And by the time I was 7 years old, even before my dad died, they had me out there sweeping greens at the miniature golf course because they'd get covered in leaves and debris and rocks and pebbles. And I was out there in my Aquaman underoos and cowboy boots, age 8, sweeping greens, working the batting cages. It led me to be pretty industrious in college, where I paid off my student loans selling on eBay. I went to shoe stores, and I bought out the shoe stores when they had their end of year clearance. So I'd buy them for like $5 a pair. I'd buy every shoe in the building for $5 a pair, and then I'd take them down the street and set up on a street corner and sell them for $35, $40 a pair. And I got those traits from my mom and my dad. She was entrepreneurial and business-minded. Despite not having much money, I always remember money being an issue, like it being a thing, that we had to be careful about money. But she took me to Taekwondo classes and tournaments and dance classes. I did tap and jazz. I'm not going to show you. Don't ask. I did piano lessons and 4-H camps and church camps and ski trips and baseball and track, and I even was a football player in middle school when I was prepubescent and all the other kids were going through puberty. They put me in as nose guard, which I don't know if you know about nose guard, but that's where they put the big kids. and I was about this tall and about this wide at that point. Got my butt handed to me, but she was there cheering me on like I was the best football player in the world. She bought me a Michael Jackson jacket. I look back and I think, how was this cool? But it was, man. It was cool at the time. The Michael Jackson jacket and the one sequin glove. And me and my cousins all wore them. We were like this Michael Jackson gang going down the street on our bikes. She bought me tickets to see Michael Jackson in St. Louis, and we went up there. And like I said, she never had money. She invested everything in the kids, everything in my brother and I. We got up to St. Louis, and Michael Jackson got strep throat and canceled his concert, so I never got to see him. I'm still bitter about that. Bought me my first pair of OG Air Jordans, the 1985 version that sells for like $45,000 now. And I ran track. I ran the 800 in those shoes, and I vividly remember being way behind all the other kids, clodding along in these big, heavy boots. And I just thought they were so cool, and at that age, I thought they made me run faster, and they didn't. But when she saw the other kids making fun of me, she went out and bought me proper track shoes. She would often get us hotel rooms at a Roach Motel down the street, or when times were better, at the Executive Inn in Paducah. This fine establishment with an indoor pool. She would let us invite our friends. We could each invite one friend, and we'd stay in one of these rooms next to the pool and spend the day at the pool. I have some stories that I knew Mom loved me, but it was really illustrated by a couple stories. This is an overhead view of where I went to school as an elementary student, Farley Elementary in Paducah, Kentucky. And at one point, I think it was in the 6th grade, it might have been in the 5th grade. My dad had already passed. It was a couple years past that. I'm hesitant to tell some of these stories, but at one point I was joking with a girl seated next to me and said, I've been thinking about killing myself. And I was just being a stupid kid. And I remember taking a ballpoint pen and retracting the pen, so it was just a little circle at the bottom, and placing it against one of my veins and pressing real hard. And I was just being goofy with this girl, trying to tease her. I don't know where I'd heard about suicide or where I'd heard about what it was like. But I can vividly remember seeing that circular mark on my vein. I don't know why. There's some things I remember, and that I remember. I remember pressing it down hard enough, pretending that I was going to slit my wrist. And I was just doing it for attention or stupidity or silliness. But my mom picked me up from school a couple hours later. So that girl had gone to the teacher and told what I had said. And my mom came to pick me up, and she was hysterical. She was driving me away. I said, they said, your mom's here to pick you up. I said, why? They said, she wants to talk to you. Got in the car, and we had barely pulled out of the driveway when she just lost it, just weeping, saying, what is wrong? How can you think that way? What have I done wrong? Your life is so good. Why would you? And she just was hysterical. And I felt so awful because I had just been being stupid. I never thought it would go anywhere. I never thought anybody would know about it. I was just being silly. But that moment of Mom's love is etched forever in my brain. That I was so important to her that even the thought of it was just unfathomable. She was just lost, thinking that I might even be contemplating such. There ain't no love like a mama's kind of love. In college and a little bit after college, I lived here, 105 South 14th Street, which was a dump. Paul was there, and it was. I had a dog that owned that place, and man, we never cleaned up, and we had people moving in and out. I had roommates at that time. I've had roommates most of my life. But we had one roommate who was orphaned and coming in and out of the foster care system, and we took him in for a while when he had nobody else that would take him in. And he took a knife to all our furniture. Just one day, he got a hankering to take a knife to our furniture was not nice. I mean, it was stuff we had gotten at Goodwill, but he had slashed it up pretty good, and Mom had found out about it. And so she took me to a furniture auction that was going on, and we went through looking at it pre-auction, so they had all the stuff out displayed. And let me reemphasize, Mom did not have money. there, I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little while. But there was one set of furniture that I just loved. It was this leather sofa, love seat, and recliner. It was just beautiful. And if I remember right, and this was back, early 90s, it was like $7,000 was the normal price for it, but they were about to auction it off as their end-of-year clearance sale. And I said, man, wouldn't it be nice if we could afford that? And she said, it sure would be. But when the auction started, that sofa and love seat and couch came up. Recliner came up. They said $1,500, and people started bidding $1,600, $1,800, $2,000, $2,500. Got to $2,800, and they said going once, going twice, and Mom raised her hand, $2,800. And I grabbed her hand and pulled it down and said, what are you doing? She said, let me do this for you. I knew at that moment she was putting it on a credit card, and I knew it was a bad financial decision. It's not a story about a mom's financial prowess. It's a story about a mom's love for her kid. And she was adamant, let me do this for you. Let me buy this for you. And I was adamant, I can't. And I went to the auctioneers afterwards, and I said, my mom has made a terrible mistake. She can't afford this furniture. Can you please put it back on the auction block? And they reluctantly did so, and she was steamed at me for weeks about that. But I also knew that what she did for one kid, she did for another. So that wasn't a $2,800 decision that day. It was a $5,600 decision, because whatever she did for me, she was going to do for my brother. And I knew she couldn't afford it. There ain't no love like a mom's kind of love. She didn't have money. There was my dad had businesses. He was quite entrepreneurial, but he was also really, really bad with money. He bought my mom a church for her birthday one year. I know. It's like, what? What are you even talking about? It was the church she grew up in Rossville, Illinois. It was this old antique church with stained glass windows and pews. I still have one of the pews on my front porch now, and one of the stained glass windows hanging in my house. But he was like, babe, I bought you a church. And that church was like the bane of our existence for many years, because it was falling apart and condemned, and they had police lines, do not cross around it, and we finally had it leveled and sold the land for much less than he purchased it for. Bad. So he could have been very wealthy, but Mom inherited some of that, was just spending. But there was also some stuff in the will when my dad died that was messed up, and so a lot of the transfer of ownership of the businesses didn't go in places it should. And there's a lot to it, but it's important for the next story back at 10 Royal Oak Drive in Paducah, Kentucky. The bottom line is we were in terrible debt, and she was having to declare bankruptcy. And of course, I was really concerned about this, and we would talk about it. She was pretty transparent and open about it. Still going to Taekwondo classes, still doing piano lessons or dance classes or going to 4-H camp or whatever. She was invested in the kids. But I remember her at one point saying, I'm leaving this in God's hands. And that's never left me. She said, I'm leaving it in God's hands, and that's the best place it can be. And what's really wild about the story is it was quite a bit of debt. The bank called her one day, and I've never heard of another bank doing this. They just said, we've decided to absolve your debt. You're done. Just out of the blue, the bank called her and said, and it was tens of thousands of dollars, if not 100,000 or more. And they said, it's cool. We're good. We'll write it off. I don't know if banks are in the practice of doing that, but I know that I remembered that. And that I remember that moment of God saying, of Mom saying, I place this in God's hands. It was a moment that instilled trust in me. This is where I wedged in the Bible verse. I felt like as a good preacher, I got to have at least one scripture involved. And I'm just going to be honest about that. I'm telling stories about Mom, but we are a church. It's Jesus adjacent. Philippians 4 says, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. My mom was once in the hospital with a woman they were separated by a curtain. And the woman was in the habit of saying, it ain't nothing but a thing. So Mom would say, do you care what I watch on TV? She'd say, ain't nothing but a thing. Or the nurses would come in and say, what would you like for dinner? Ain't nothing but a thing. And my mom, for the rest of her life, said that phrase, ain't nothing but a thing. And it kind of stuck with me, is this idea that you can trust, it's going to be okay. And I learned that from my mom. And I think my wife and kids would say that I carry it today. Sometimes to my detriment. My wife wants to talk about this, and this, the stuff that we need to plan for, and I have this attitude of like, it'll all work out. It ain't nothing but a thing. But I got that from my mom. She would say, this too shall pass. That was something she always said in times of trouble. This too shall pass. So I learned the concept of trust from her. And I learned about faith partially as a result of my relationship with her. And there was she had Meniere's disease, which is an inner ear disorder or vertigo in her later life. They say Van Gogh had it, and that's why he cut off his ear. That it wasn't anything more romantic. He was just suffering tremendously, and so he slashed his ear off. And it would cause her terrible, terrible vertigo spells. She described it as riding a tilt-a-whirl for 36 hours at a time. And I could always tell when she had an attack because I'd enter the house and it smelled like vomit. Not pretty, but true. And one day she was working at the veterinary clinic and had a spell. And these attacks, when they hit, and it made her life very hard because there was no predicting when they would come. There was no predicting when the world was going to start spinning, when she was going to get nauseated, when her legs were going to get kicked out from under her, and she was going to have to be bedridden for several days in a row. So even something as simple that we take for granted as going to the movies or dropping off a deposit at the bank or going out for tacos was fearful for her because if it happened on the road, she was in danger. And she had a spell one day, and she had been at the veterinary clinic, and she came home. And I entered the house, and I remember the fan being on, and it smelling like vomit, and walk in, and she's laying in bed moaning. And when that happened, she would be debilitated for a full day easily. And usually kind of like when you have a migraine headache and you get over it, you still have a couple days after that that's pretty awful. So a bad attack was a 3 to 5 day event. And I don't know why this time I walked in and I was ticked off. Not at her, but at this disease and at the devil. And I went over and I put my hands on her and I said, God, in Jesus' name, heal my mom. She got up immediately and went back to work that day. And from that day forward, the disease was on the decline. It was in remission. She felt better. She still had attacks occasionally, but they weren't as intense. But I can't say that I'm some super apostle or anything. I don't even know exactly what happened that day. But I know that I entered the room mad and calling out to the God that she had taught me about, and something happened. Now, Mom was a good and loving mom. She was a person of faith, but she wasn't always a saint, that's for sure. We used to travel out west to visit my brother and to see the mountains and go on ski trips. Does anybody else remember Stuckey's? Stuckey's, I don't know if there's many Stuckey's left, but Stuckey's used to litter the Midwest. I mean, every exit had a Stuckey's. I remember one time at Stuckey's, Mom got into it with this woman at the carbonated beverage machine. I don't remember what it was over, or the hot dog roller or something. And I think the woman stepped in front of her. Well, to kind of describe the edge my mom had, when she was at a drive-through window and they said, would you please pull forward and wait? She would say, no, I think I'll just wait here. She had this edge to her that wasn't going to let anybody step on her. And this woman at Stuckey's had stepped in front of her or spilled something on her. I to this day don't know what happened. But she was ready to throw hands. I mean, they were yelling at each other, and me and my brother were grabbing her and dragging her out of there. And it took a long time for her to calm down, but she had an edge to her. And she, like many of us, bore scars. I don't know if you'll be able to see them from back there. And this is the story that I'm most hesitant to tell because I don't want to betray her. But I feel like transparency is important, that she was a mom, that was a good mom, and also bore tremendous scars. And you can be both. You can be a person with tremendous scars and still a good and loving human being. And I don't know if you can see it. This is a picture of her and Siler watching a movie together. I can barely see it, but she had these visible scar lines on her cheeks in rows right here. And I heard I heard the story of how she acquired those scars many times. She had been living in Chicago, working for the Scott Forsman Company as a book editor, and she had entered her apartment when a man entered behind her and grabbed her from behind and threw her down on the stairs, and she was screaming and screaming, and he cut her. He took a knife and cut her face. Well, later on in life, when she felt like I was old enough, she told me that that was not the truth. That had never happened. That that's the story she told people about her scars. The scars were self-inflicted. There was a time in her life when she was just devastatingly brokenhearted, filled with self-loathing, and she cut herself. So part of it is, I want you to see this good and loving mom that taught her son a lot about faith also bore tremendous scars and hardness and an edge. There were other stories. But there's also a transparency. She didn't have to tell me that. She did not have to confide in me with that story. But she did. And she confided with me with another story that I'm not even going to tell today. But a decision she had made earlier on in life that greatly affected the life of another person that was really bad. And it was this thing that she carried every day she thought about it. And every day she prayed for mercy from God because she thought she was unworthy of mercy because of this decision she had made. And it was another story that she told me that she was being transparent about that she didn't have to tell me. She was living in this apartment. This was a house that my wife and I owned at that point. It was separated into 5 different apartments. She was living in the garage apartment for $175 a month. She was on disability. Her previous house had been yielded to bankruptcy. So life was not turning out exactly how Mom had planned it. But during that time, I saw faith in her. I saw her embrace the mercies of Jesus like she never had before in her life. I saw her passionate about God and passionate about the scriptures and passionate about worshiping God and being close to God. This is one of the last pictures taken of her that I found while I was looking around this week. But I was at a conference in Dallas, Texas when I got the call that she'd had a massive brain hemorrhage. Was in the hospital and boarded a flight and sat next to her bed for the 3 or 4 days before she passed. This is the part that's going to get me, doggone it. When she died, we had some time in the room with her, and as we left, I asked the doctor if I could have time by myself with her. I think I've shared this story in here before, but I don't know why, but I kissed her feet. And I told her I'm sorry. I don't know why. I've never known why in that moment that was my response. But it was. And the I'm sorry was this cry for I wish I had more time. I wish I had taken better advantage of the time. And, there's probably some ugly shame attached to it too, that she wouldn't want for me. But Andrew said last week, call your mom as part of his sermon. I wish I had done that more. I wish I had been more appreciative. I feel a lot of confidence that she knew she was loved by me. But for whatever reason, in those last moments, it was not despair, not exactly even regret. It was wanting to connect with her, saying, you were worth more. Going through her stuff afterwards was challenging, but I found this little memento in her handwriting. You guys probably won't be able to see it back there, but it says, dumb things I got to do. This was her to-do list. But it's not a to-do list. At the top it says, I wish I had known you sooner. It's a prayer. Then she wrote, no regrets. And I'm not sure why she wrote this, but she said, no one spoke my name like Jesus. And then she wrote the word Mary. I'm not positive what there's a scene after the empty tomb where Jesus says the word Mary, says the name of Mary. And I think I might remember my mom being touched by that moment somehow. Then she wrote this. It says, more than anything, and that's on the sheet. You just can't read it from the background. It says, more than anything, I long to please you, Master. Be my strength. This is the part that really got me. She wrote at the bottom, a new life as clean as the old was defiled. She was a lady with scars that loved her kids. She was a lady with an edge that refused to pull forward when asked to at a drive-through restaurant. Was ready to go to blows with a woman who had stepped in front of her at a vending machine. Had made decisions that she deeply regretted the rest of her life. But I firmly believe she had come to peace. I know that she came to peace. And that whole thing feels very Jesus adjacent to me. I know it's not a traditional sermon, but I don't even know exactly where to go from here, except to say that Mom was a conundrum in some ways, but beautiful. I recognize that there are some that are mourning today. There are some that are celebrating and celebrating easily, some that are celebrating with a hybrid of mourning and celebration, and it's a mixed bag across the room. And we just want to honor that and recognize it and say that it's okay. I'm celebrating my mom today and weeping over her, and it's okay to be in that place. I've asked Marilyn Hawk to come and read a Mother's Day blessing.
I feel honored to be able to say these words that H wrote to all for blessing. For all who have or who have had a mother, and thus for all, a blessing as we give thanks to those who paid a high price for us to live. For those who've carried a child, endured labor, and given birth, a blessing. We honor the sacrifice you made. Your pain brought forth life. For those who have raised children alone or with a partner, we bless you for all you've given, your energy, your time, your resources, your very self. Thank you. For those who have wept over a child for any reason, we bless you in the love that shaped those tears, in the empathy they show, and in the care that they describe. For those for whom this day is painful, for those who have lost a child or a mother, or whose relationships are marked by deep challenge, we bless you. We acknowledge your grief, believing God in Christ stands with you. For those who long for children but for any reason do not have them, we bless you. We see your desire and your sorrow. We are sorry. May Christ hold your heart tenderly and bring peace. For those who feel alienated on this day by family expectations, by cultural norms, by the ache of isolation, by a life that doesn't fit the mold, we bless you. You are seen, you are known, you are loved. For those who find motherhood a struggle, as most do, we bless you. We honor the mix of trial and triumph, of exhaustion and joy. It's not easy, but it is beautiful. For those who celebrate today with a full heart, we stand with you. We bless you. And we pray the joy and peace of Christ fills your home. For all who hear these words, a blessing. May Christ be your all in all. May your days be filled with love that cannot be measured. And may Jesus speak your name as only he can, with tenderness, with power, and with joy.